the MCAT Cars podcast, session number 29. The cars section of the MCAT gives thousands of pre-meds nightmares every night. Whether you're an ESL student, lack confidence while reading, or a slow reader like me, Jack Westin and the medical school headquarters are here to help you score higher in every section so you can be confident you're ready to get the MCAT score of your dreams. And welcome to the MCAT Cars podcast, where we are going to help you score higher on your MCAT. We focus on the cars section and breaking down articles, but the skills that you will learn here will help you on every section of the MCAT. How do we do that? Well, I have the help of my friend Jack Westin from jackwestin.com. He is the premier MCAT Cars tutor online. He's got an amazing MCAT Cars course that has helped thousands of students score higher on the MCAT Cars and MCAT overall. If you are looking for some more individualized help with your cars section or MCAT overall, go to medicalschoolhq.net/Jack Westin to get an exclusive discount off of his MCAT Cars course. You can also text the word MCAT Cars, all one word, MCAT Cars, to 44222, and that'll give you the link as well. We're going to dive in for a great conversation today. Jack Westin back for some more MCAT Cars podcasts. How are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good. I'm working on my perfectionism. I think I'm making a dent in it.
Great.
Every day a little bit better.
That's all it takes, right? Just as long as you're, realizing it's, something that you want to work on, right?
Yeah. The 1% rule. You ever hear about the 1% rule? Like 1% change every day?
Yeah, I've heard that. But Go ahead. Let me know,
Oh, I can't. I don't know it all, but just the compounding effect. Like if you change 1% every day, it's a huge change at the end of the year.
Yeah, I heard an analogy like that where if you are trying to fly, like if a pilot is trying to fly from Los Angeles to Washington, D.C.
Yeah, I use this analogy all the time. Course correcting.
Yeah, if you're off by 1 degree, right, you're going to Florida.
Yep.
You're not going to D.C. So I think, if you change a little bit every day, your habits will start changing a little bit. It's hard. It's hard to change bad habits, man. It's not easy. I mean, I think everyone struggles with it.
Yeah. But hopefully a student listening to this podcast is aware of it. They're working on it. They're trying to learn and improve their CARS score and their MCAT score overall. So what do we have in store today?
So this passage is pretty straightforward. I would say, is very common on the MCAT where they try to show you trends and you're supposed to pick up on those trends. So very realistic passage that you may actually find on the test.
Okay. As always, you can follow along in the show notes. There's a link to the article so you can read along with us. All right, to paragraph 1. In 1936, Walter Benjamin, the German philosopher and cultural critic, published an essay titled The Storyteller. All right, so a little scene setting here. We have a name, Walter Benjamin, 1936, and an essay, The Storyteller. All right, ostensibly about the Russian writer Nikolai Leskov, Benjamin used the piece to analyze the meaning and function of storytelling. Ooh, okay. Now, second sentence in, I'm already a little confused. So ostensibly, I don't know what that means. But we're given another name here, Russian writer Nikolai Leskov. He used the piece to analyze the meaning and function of storytelling. Okay. So
what is this book, or what is this?
The essay, The Storyteller, is about storytelling.
Exactly. That's all it is.
Okay.
The function of storytelling. That's pretty much what this essay or what this piece is all about.
Okay. All right. So again, kind of reiterating the same themes. If you get tripped up by a word or a sentence, just keep going and let the pieces fall into place.
Yeah, you don't really have to worry about ostensibly, right? It's not that critical here. As long as you focused on the latter clause, right, you should be okay. You'll know Benjamin used the piece, right?
Yep.
And that's the key here.
Okay. Long ago, Benjamin suggested stories offered listeners practical or moral counsel, much as fairy tales now did for children. So Benjamin is telling us, or using the storyteller, the essay, about what the stories were for, the practical and moral counsel.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty interesting. I don't know if you've ever thought of it this way, but stories are giving us moral guidance in some ways, right? So I think that's pretty interesting here.
Yeah. They transmitted common wisdom framed by the personal experience of the storyteller, which was delivered in such a way that listeners could incorporate it into their lives. So just showing the impact here of the stories. That's common wisdom and the experience, so that the whoever's listening can take that and use it.
Yeah, those are the best books. I love books where you can kind of see how other people reacted to situations, and maybe you can follow their suit or not follow their suit, right? I mean, depending on what they did. So yeah, absolutely.
This kind of storytelling was falling victim to the forces of modernity. Modern. How the heck do you say that?
I think it's modernity.
Modernity. All right. Yeah. I'll reread that one. This kind of storytelling was falling victim to the forces of modern. My mouth doesn't work that way.
Modernity, right. I guess. Yeah.
Modernity. There we go. Oh, whatever. All right. This kind of storytelling was falling victim to the forces of modernity, Benjamin argued. Modernity, I have no idea what that means, other than potentially, if I had to assume, just using the word modern and falling victim, that the storytelling is going away, like using the wisdom and personal experience and telling stories to teach people is just, we're losing it.
What is modern? What does that mean when something is modern?
It's just new.
So something new is coming in that may be erasing what we've been doing in the past.
Yeah. Okay. Soldiers returning from the battlefields of the Great War, for example, were less likely than earlier combatants to speak of what they'd gone through, finding ordinary language incommensurate with the horrors of mechanical warfare. So it's interesting that the thing that they show as new here is just how we fought war, and people less willing to talk about it because of that.
Yeah, so this modern angle is really the Great War, which to us is not modern at all, right? Yeah. But in the perspective of the time, that was a new style, a new time in their lives where maybe storytelling didn't work well, right?
Yeah, and as a reader now, it's like, well, of course we have Snapchat and Instagram. That's the new stuff, right? But now we're just we're talking about different example here.
Yeah. So just to clarify, storytelling is kind of being taken away because of some new angle, some modern angle, and this modern angle is the Great War, right? And they're less likely to speak or convey their ideas or their stories because of the horrors, right, of the war. Okay.
Yep. But the principal cause of storytelling's decline was a new form of communication, quote, information or verifiable and topical news. Okay, so it does have a little twist there at the end of a new way of communicating, information or verifiable and topical news. So it's interesting, especially now, right? Verifiable and topical news. We have fake news all the time now. Yeah. So it looks like the author is trying to show us that potentially what we see as commonplace now as news and newspapers and TV shows, but back then are potentially just different forms of communicating with news stories and newspapers potentially.
Yeah. I mean, it says the decline, storytelling's decline, what was a new form of communication. So this news, right? I'm thinking, whenever I think of news, I think of like CNN, Fox News, CNBC, whatever. So, I'm thinking that kind of news has affected storytelling.
Yeah.
Right. Decline. Not only was it the time, right? Not only was it this modern time and war, but it's also this new way of presenting info, news.
Yeah. And what they say, I think potentially just what stands out to me with this paragraph is how Benjamin described storytelling was common wisdom framed by personal experience versus this new form of communication, information, which is verifiable, right? Personal experience isn't necessarily verifiable. And so we're getting different types of information because it's not just somebody's personal experience.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Interesting. Good. I like this one. All right. Paragraph 2. The rise of electronic communication meant that news could be instantly transmitted around the globe. All right. So again, you have to remember the times here. 1936, the internet was not around, but it's just painting the picture of instead of one person standing in front of a group of people telling a story, that this news, topical, verifiable news, is being sent everywhere instantly.
Okay.
Although Benjamin noted that this mode of communication was not always more accurate than the forms it had overtaken, its authority depended on the appearance, at least, of accuracy. Interesting. So Benjamin is saying, again, going back to that verifiable aspect of this new form of communication, he's saying it's not always more accurate, but they kind of made it appear to be more accurate.
Yeah. Yeah. So the appearance is what's important to make it seem accurate, right?
Yeah. Okay. Quote, no event any longer comes to us without already being shot through with explanation, Benjamin wrote. So this sentence is confusing to me. Shot through with explanation is something that would confuse me, and I'd probably just have to move on and be okay with not understanding it.
Yeah, well, with news, you explain yourself, right? So you kind of have to associate news with explanation, which is what they brought up earlier, right? It's this new form of communication where you're just communicating directly, objectively, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So being shot through with explanation is kind of the opposite of storytelling. I mean, if you think about it, stories, when you write your personal statement, you don't explain every little thing that you did, right? You kind of show instead of tell, right? So storytelling is the same way. If you want to tell someone that you're a good person or whatever, you're not going to tell them, "Oh, I'm a good person," right? You're going to show it through your actions.
Okay.
So I think that's kind of what they're getting at.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Quote, by now, almost nothing that happens benefits storytelling, end quote. Nothing that happens benefits storytelling. Again, I'm not quite sure what that means, what benefits storytelling, but kind of paragraph as a whole. Obviously, the news is being transmitted very quickly, very instantly everywhere, and it may not always be accurate, even though it may seem like it is.
Yeah, well, it needs to look accurate. They haven't said if it is or isn't accurate. We don't know that really. But yeah, so news is transmitted more easily now, and it also needs to look accurate, right? I mean, I think those are the big points that you really have to know, and you have to also know that it's kind of taking away storytelling. It's news. When they say by now almost nothing that happens benefits storytelling, basically news is not storytelling. It's kind of the opposite of storytelling in a way.
Okay. Next paragraph 3. 80 odd years after Benjamin wrote about the decline of storytelling, we are living in a new golden age of it in the form of the podcast. Yay! On-demand audio that a listener can download and play while commuting or exercising or, given the right equipment, showering. I've tried listening to podcasts in the shower, and it's too echoey because it's the bathroom, and I just can't hear anything. But anyway.
I knew you'd think about that. Whatever. Yeah.
I've tried, trust me, and I'm waiting for the waterproof AirPods, and then I'll be golden.
Don't they have that? I mean, I'm sure they have something like that.
I'm sure they have some. I just haven't tried any yet.
Built-in speakers. Who knows, man? Like so much going on.
One day. All right. I could get those like bone conduction ones that you can wear while you're swimming.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Oh, yeah. Done. Amazon.com right now. All right. Sorry. Back to this. So this is interesting. As soon as I started reading this paragraph, I knew that podcast was going to come, and I didn't read this before. Because yes, podcasts, the author is saying podcasts are this new form of storytelling.
Yeah, sounds good. I mean, now we're in this new age, right? It's kind of interesting. This passage went from, 1936 to now.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy? So you kind of have to keep in mind the time period when you're reading this,
Mhm.
right? And you have to have a relative sense of time, right? So you can't just read it and think all of this is in the 30s or all this is now. You have to really understand where the author's coming from back then to now.
Yeah. And it's interesting the way that this author used to make that time jump 80 odd years after Benjamin wrote, instead of saying like in current time, right?
Yeah.
So that may throw some people off, not knowing what 80 odd years means.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 80 odds and like somewhere between 80 and 90 maybe.
Yeah. 80-ish,
And
right?
80-ish, yeah. And then also golden age. I think a lot of students do not notice that, so they won't notice, wow, how did you know podcasts are a form of storytelling?
Mhm.
Well, it says we're living in a new golden age of it.
Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, it would have been nice if they said, it's ironic, blah, 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 but they said it in a way that says, okay, well, we're really in a great time for storytelling. Golden age refers to the fact that it's the best time.
Mhm.
Golden means the best. So anytime you hear, oh, this is the gold standard, etc., gold is always referred to as one of the best things, right, in English. So whenever they say gold or golden age, that means it's the best age for it.
Yeah. Okay. A recent study conducted by Edison Research found that nearly a quarter of Americans listen to podcasts at least once a month. Wow. I think that number's a lot higher now, actually. The new data literally just came out like a week or two ago. But anyway, so we're given some data here about how many people listen to podcasts and how often, which is great. The most popular shows, such as The Daily, produced by The Times and featuring Michael Barbaro, a former reporter, as a winning, accessible interlocutor. What is that? Yeah? Locutor.
Yeah. So interlocutor.
Okay.
Yeah.
As a winning, accessible interlocutor of his news gathering colleagues, or the Joe Rogan Experience, in which the bluff comedian interviews public figures about things like masculinity and technology, are downloaded tens of millions of times each month. So the author's just trying to show kind of impact, the tens of millions of times each month, just to show how popular some shows are.
Yeah, golden age, right? So
Yep.
even if you didn't know what golden age means, you'll notice, wow, they're really popular. A quarter of all Americans are listening. That's a lot,
Mhm.
I don't know if you've ever heard of the Joe Rogan Experience, but like I thought that's a great podcast.
Me? I listen to specific guests, right? When
Yeah.
Elon Musk was on, I'm like, I gotta listen to that one.
Yeah, exactly. Pick and choose, right?
Yep.
I'm surprised they haven't mentioned Ryan Gray here.
I know.
Years podcast.
I'm going to send in a little comment to them. Darn you, New Yorker. Some of the most acclaimed podcasts, such as Slate's Slow Burn, which is in its second season, plumbed the painful history of President Bill Clinton's impeachment, offer a provocative lens not just on the past, but also on current events. So again, just another example of a podcast and what it could do. So one is kind of news, the other one is interviews, and this one is kind of more research into a presidency. When the show's host, Leon Navok, I don't know. When the show's host, Leon Navok, interviews Juanita Broderick about her claim that in the 1970s she was sexually assaulted by Clinton, it makes for sobering listening in the era of #MeToo. So again, just more examples here of the impact of podcasts and what they can do.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, that's it. Just as long as we're talking about podcasts and how it's a new form of storytelling, right? A new age of storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
And that all these are really just examples. So you can read quickly when you read this. I don't recommend skimming. Never skim. But, if you notice that this is all kind of referring to the same thing, then you don't have to sit there and, memorize all these things, right? You don't have to write this stuff down.
Mm-hmm.
The names are important. You should keep track of the names, but even if you didn't know them, at least you know where they are, right, relative to the rest of the passage.
Yeah. Okay. Fourth paragraph here. Beyond the top of the charts, there are 500,000 other podcasts available, fashioned for every conceivable interest or taste. I wonder if there's any MCAT podcasts for cars specifically. Yeah. So just the kind of the breadth of podcasts out there. 500,000. It's 700,000 now. It's funny. I know all the new data on this. If a person wants to know more about Walter Benjamin, she can listen to an episode of Thinking Aloud, a BBC Radio 4 show in which Laurel Taylor, a British sociologist, renders Benjamin's work in plain spoken language. Or download the National Gallery of Arts podcast, in which the Princeton art historian Hal Foster delivers a Mellon lecture about him. Or find the Clock Tower podcast dedicated to preserving archival audio, which offers recordings of several radio scripts for children that Benjamin wrote in the 1930s. Or search out an episode of Giving the Mic to the Wrong Person, a left-leaning podcast hosted by Jeremy Salmon that features an off-the-cuff roundtable about Benjamin. Quote, he's one of the Frankfurt school guys, from what I understand, end quote, in the context of contemporary politics and culture. Wow. All right. So basically, lots of podcasts, right? 500,000 at this time of writing, and then giving a specific example about Walter Benjamin and all of the different places where you can learn more about him.
Yeah, this is very important because what's happening is the author is bringing up a lot of details. And if you start really focusing too much on these details, you're zooming in when you should be zooming out.
Yeah.
Right. Kind of like a camera lens. You don't want to zoom in too much to all these details, because if you do, you're going to, this goes back to last week, being a perfectionist, you're going to worry too much about little things that they'll never even test you on.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Zoom out. Think about, why is this even being discussed? Where are we going with this? I think that's way more important than, remembering every little detail they brought up.
Yeah. It's, I don't know if you use this language at all, but I use it all the time when students ask me about like silly nitpicky details about a specific course that they may need. And I always use the term micro versus macro. Like students like to focus too much on the micro when they should be focusing on the macro.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the reason I think that happens is because you're trained to focus on the micro when you take bio, and physics and chem. You have to know every little thing, right? And that transfers over to MCAT and everything else. So I think it's good. You just need to know when to turn it on and when to turn it off.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Paragraph 5. In the first years of podcasts, a decade or so ago, technological limitations militated against their widespread adoption. They had to be laboriously transferred from a computer to an MP3 player or an iPod.
Those are good old days.
Yeah. Plug it in and transfer it all. So just kind of painting the picture of what used to have to happen to listen to a podcast.
Okay.
Podcasts were made by geeks for geeks, kind of describing the early days of podcasting. And okay. That changed in 2014 when Apple added a podcast app to the iPhone, making subscribing almost effortless. So giving a specific point in time where this all changed. Even better, it was usually free. Okay. So it became easier and it was free, and potentially the authors, I don't know if we're supposed to read in to this, but my assumption is the author is saying this is why we have 500,000 podcasts now and lots of people listening.
Yeah. I mean, it's just becoming more accessible, right? So storytelling is coming back and it's more accessible than ever. So that's it.
Are we supposed to read into that? Like, could there be a question like, why do a quarter of all Americans listen to a podcast once a month? Will that be a typical question where it's like, well, it's because Apple Podcasts app and they're free?
Yeah. So the way they would phrase it, they would ask something similar to that. The way they would phrase it is, so the author brought up wireless adoption to imply that, and then you would have to know the answers to make it more, because it's more accessible now. Right.
So, okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Great article. I love podcasts, if you couldn't tell.
I knew you'd like this one. I mean, it's up your alley, right? Podcast. You're the podcast guy.
Yeah. And it's an interesting one. So it starts off with like, oh, storytelling. This is going to be a hard paragraph in 1936. And then it's like, oh, quick change. Podcast. Yay.
Yeah, this goes back to trends, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they love these articles or passages that explain trends on how people thought before, how people think now, or how things changed over time, and you have to be aware of that change. So it's very common to see this on the test.
All right, there you have it. An amazing conversation today, all about podcasts. You know, it was a subject that I like, but remember, even if it is a subject that you're going to like, the questions and the way that the author is writing something may differ than what you want and what you expect. So keep your mind open, read thoroughly, read critically, and hopefully that will help you as you are answering the questions. Don't forget to check out Jack Westin and the MCAT CARS course at medicalschoolhq.net/Jack Westin, or text the word MCAT CARS, all one word, to 44222. Hope you have a great week. We'll see you next time.